Okay, so I've got a page set up now, ready for printing, but I want to develop this a bit further and put a title block on it before I set up another page, which I'll then have some different scales or some viewports with some different scales. So the title block, of course, is going to be the same on each page, and that's why I'm doing it first before I then copy the page to make a new one. So you can see here I've got a layer for annotation, but I usually find it's a good idea to have an extra layer just for the title block. So I'm going to make a new layer and call it a title, and I usually like just to leave annotation white. So black and white in AutoCAD, the same colour if that isn't clear already. So that's, again, one of those sort of seemingly obvious options. Of course, you can't print white, so any white line in AutoCAD and anything else that's white will always print black. And also, though, you can make things black in AutoCAD and they will also print black. But black on a white background usually doesn't work too well. Yep. So it's just a new layer, and other than the colour, I'm leaving all the other settings on default. So I'll make that the current layer as well, either double clicking next to it or the button at the top. And I can close this and start drawing the elements that I need for my title block. So for an A3 page, you can have a title block landscape at the bottom, but for A3 you can also have a title block on the side, and for pages bigger than A3 you'd normally have it on the side as well. So I'm going to do it down the side. And I'll just start with the line tool. And you can see then that we've got a dashed line that's just inside the edge of the page. So the white background there is the page that is set for printing, and then the the dashed line is actually set by the printer. So it's the printable area of this particular printer. Yeah, well, I'm doing it for A3. So, well, actually, maybe you should check that. So if you aren't sure of your page size before you maybe draw anything, you can right-click on your tab down the bottom, which is probably Layout 1, go to the Page Setup Manager, and then click Modify, just to check your page size. So again, so you right-click on the tab down the bottom, Layout 1, and then go to Page Setup Manager. And then just click Modify. So, Page Setup Manager, so you need to right-click on the tab, right-click on that, and then Page Setup Manager. Okay, so again, these should be steps that you're doing all the time. So you should be practicing. If you're not remembering these things, they're things you should be practicing during the week many times. And if you're not already, I honestly don't know how you could be doing your work if you're not using AutoCAD to produce your drawings, because you just won't produce drawings fast enough as you get into your later subjects. And of course, you need to do these steps every time you print. So I'll do it one more time, because these are things you need to do all the time. Right-click on the tab. Page Setup Manager is the way you get into your page settings every time. Modify, and all I'm doing there is looking at the page size. So it's the same as I set last week. It's A3, I haven't changed it, but you should have an awareness of that when you go to make something like a title block, because they're going to be different for every different page size. So again, when I go to draw the line, I'm looking at this page, and I'm also looking at the printable area, but remembering that this is set for the printer I've chosen, and other printers are going to have different printable areas. So instead of just being inside the dash line, I'm going to come a fair way inside, just to allow for other printers that might have a smaller printable area. There's no real rule here, you just need to use some judgment, and you might find if you choose a printer that's got a small printable area, you might need to make it even smaller. So I've clicked a point to start drawing my line, and just doing that by eye, maybe twice the distance of the dashed line from the edge of the page. And then I'm going to come up and take it towards the top of the page. And you can see there that it's showing me the length, which is 270 something, but I'll type in the exact length I want, which is 275. Enter. And then I'm going to come across to the left 50. Enter. And then just repeat that to go down, so 275 down, and then close it again. So I'm just drawing lines. That should be something that you're doing all the time anyway. And you can make most of the rest of it with lines. So any title blocks that you've been inserting have been made this way. They're just usually collections of lines. And then you can have either text, but then also something called attributes. So the title blocks that you would have inserted previously maybe would have asked you to enter details and then put them into the title block. So you would have seen it might have come with a dialog box and you could enter things. So that's sometimes handy, but did the one you use have really confusing labels and you maybe had to guess what they meant sometimes? I'm sure it would have. You might not have, maybe didn't read them. But I know the one you've used, so I'll just show you. Okay, so you've got title blocks here, just so you can see what attributes look like. Okay, so when you bring this title block in, click OK, and then click to place it. Enter, and it asks you for all these attributes, or the details that are going to go into the title block. But did anyone work out what these things mean? What does A mean? What does AO mean? What does describe job name, describe mean? What does that mean? Did anyone manage to... Oh, you haven't used that one? Oh, okay, so we're using a different one. Okay. All right, so anyhow, the other one, well, sure this wasn't the one? Because that's the one I saw in the... No. Didn't come up like that?
This is the one that we used before.
Which one? Oh, that's another one. Okay, so you've got it from the CAD1 exercise, right? Okay, so yeah, well, that one you won't be able to use at all because it's not the right sort of title block. So yeah, so you shouldn't be using that one. That's not the right format. But you can see this one here. So this is the one that we've got on the P drive that you can insert, and it's at least going along the bottom of the page, and it's got all the things you need in the standard way they're organised. And probably a bit like the one that you've used, it asks you for the details, and that's kind of nice. But to use that, you have to use these things called attributes, which you can see here. So I'm happy if you want to set one up with attributes. It's a good thing to try, but when you're using someone else's, they can be a bit tricky. And also, if you want to modify the title block and make it more your own, they can be really difficult to use as well. So I just want to make it clear, if you're used to that that way of doing it, where you get a dialog box that you can use to enter a lot of the details, we're not going to use that straight away, but you can definitely look at that later. But for the time being, you're actually better off just using text. And it is easier as long as you can make text. And this is where, again, people trip over a bit when they haven't or they can't set up text styles first and work with scale. So I just want to spend a bit of time on that again, and then we'll come back to the title block. So you've got there the annotation panel, which I showed you at the beginning you can use to make a text style. And I'll just bring it up again. So if you click on that panel there, unfortunately the annotation goes away, that word, but obviously clicking on that arrow opens up this sub-menu, and annotation just moves down here. And then you've got there the button first on the left, which opens up the textile dialog box. So you might remember before when I was showing you how to use that annotative scale, that I showed you how to make a text style here. And normally you just need to click the new button, give it a name. So we'll call this title block. And then I think I showed you you can use the annotative option usually as well. So we'll just stick with that. The font you can set. So Arial's a bit boring. Maybe we'll go for what's a good one that I'm using these days? Tahoma can be interesting, or even Switzerland. So if you like Helvetica, Switzerland condensed is pretty close. Or those Swiss fonts, Swiss 721, all of those are pretty good. But the condensed one can be a bit narrow, so Swiss BT, it's a bit wider. And sorry, there's another one I'm thinking of. It is a little bit limit on PCs if you don't get all the extra fonts. So it's good to know some of the good ones. And so I'm just trying to think. There is a really nice one I've been using lately that I can't remember. I'm used to using major fonts, but anyway, those probably good enough. So if you want some serif fonts, I'll give you a list of those later as well. So serif fonts are the ones with the extra serif, the extra bit on the end. So it's good to think a little bit about your font, and don't just go with the default. So those two things, we've got the name, the font, ticked annotative, but then the last most important thing is to give it a height. So I'm just going to give it a height as a general height. I can adjust it a little bit up and down from here. So 3.5 for my title block should be a good medium height, and I'll show you how to do the others. Okay, so I'm just going to click apply, and you can see that also makes it current. So I can close this now and then draw some text. Okay, so just to remind you, you need to make the text style before you go to draw the text. If you're having problems with your text, if you can't see it when you make it, then 99 times out of 100, in fact not 90 times, every time someone asks me about text and says they can't see it when they make it, I know it's because they haven't made a text style first. It's that simple. So you need to make a text style, then you shouldn't have really many problems at all with text. So, so again, I've made title block, and I can see here, if I just click on that panel, that title block is the current text style. So now I'll go to make some text, and I'll make both of the different types. So I'll start with single line, and I'm going to click a start point. Just roughly, I'm not going to be too precise here. And then you can see on the command line, it's asking for the rotation angle. So when you make single line text, it'll always ask you for that. And so it's easy to forget. I do it myself. I'll start typing away and forget that it's not asking me for the text I want to type, it's asking me for an angle. And so if I press enter, it's simply going to give me an error there. So you can see on the command line, it's told me requires valid numeric input. In other words, it needs some numbers. So looking on the command line there, I could either type in the angle I want, or what's the quick way? No, we want the angle to be 0. So I don't want to change the angle. So what's the quick way of letting it know that instead of typing anything? Enter, that's right. So if you look on the command line, you'll see it's got 0 in brackets. Whenever you see anything in those angled brackets, enter will use that option. So this might be the field for date. So you can see there it's got the cursor flashing on the screen and I can type date. And then if I press enter, it moves down to the next line. So if I backspace, it'll go back to the previous line. But it is going to give me another line if I type again. And, well, maybe I will type something. I'm going to type scale. What are some other things you might want on your title block? Any other fields you can think of that should be essential? Yeah, your name probably. That's so you'd have usually drawn by for your name. So I'll press enter. So drawn by. So what's the other one you were saying? Yes, yep, you'd have that. So you'd have project address. Now notice I'm just typing them in one hit, and I'm doing that on purpose because I want to show you how single line text works. So you probably will remember I'm using single line text to make it, but if I press enter, it's giving me extra lines. So why is it called single line text? And the reason is if I press enter a second time, I'm going to do that now, I'll then come back and select one of these lines of text, and you can see then that they're all single lines. That's why it's called single line text, because it makes individual lines, no matter how you make them. When you go on to do a new line of text, it'll make a new object, and you can move them separately. And that's really useful here, because I do want to move these objects all around to different places. But then the way you change the properties is a bit different as well. So I want to change the height of all of those and make them smaller. And so I'll show you that. I'm just going to select them here with a window. So remember, by going left to right, it only selects the things inside the window, and I've got the blue there to remind me that I'm going left to right and not right to left with the green. So with them selected, I can right click and then go to properties, and then you'll find the height there. So if I change them to 2.5, enter, and you can see they all change. But they're still separate lines of text. So that's really handy here for things like labels, which are always going to be single lines, but you can enter a whole series of them together, and you'll often be doing that with your drawings. So I'll go back and just do some more single line text. And so again, I can just click a start point roughly, and then remember that it's always going to ask for the angle, but I can press enter to keep it at 0, exactly. So, so that's one of the other little things that can trip you up with single line text. But again, thinking about the other fields, and this is something you'll be able to just do off the top of your head after a little while, knowing the fields that you should have in your title blocks. So what are some others that you should have on all your drawings? What about the person who's paying you? So do you think they need to be on the drawing? The person who's paying for the drawings? Who's paying you? So who's the person who's going to be paying you? The client, that's right, that's probably the most important thing. If you leave that off, when you issue the drawings, trust me, it doesn't go down that well. Then how are you going to reference the drawings? How are you going to know which drawing's which? Yep, that's right. You could, that's right. So you can have a drawing title or name, but also probably just as important, a drawing number. And then you should have a project number as well. Okay, so they're really all the main fields. you might have checked by as well as drawn by, but not in all cases. And then you'll also probably have an area for your own business information, so you might have a logo, and then you could also have your own business address and business details. But those things are optional. So these are the things that are required on every technical title block. And so again, because it's single line text, the easiest way to change the height is, again, bring up properties and just changing it in that field there. Multi-line text is a little bit different. So I'm going to use multi-line text for some of these fields because things like say the project's address will probably go over multiple lines. So it's easy to move single line text around just by selecting it. You can click on the grip on the corner and then just pick it up and move it anywhere you like. So I'm moving that up above, and I'm then going to make multi-line text for the address field. So with the multi-line text tool, instead of clicking a point, you click 2 points to make a rectangle. And then you can see it's pretty different to single line text because it also gives you all of these options up on the ribbon, and you can change a lot of those as you're typing. So there you can see it's got the title block text style that I made, and it's set to the same font and it's got the same height, but I can change that as I go. So I could type here 2.5 and have a different height. And so the address here, well, let's just say where we are, Edgware Road, Enmore. And so it's a lot like Word. You can select any of the text that you've made in that text box as well, and adjust these settings. So I can change the height while it's selected, and I can change the justification. So it's a lot like Word. You can change it to left or centre or right, and justify is a bit different to the Word option, but something, well, does the same justification but doesn't centre it. That's the main difference. But again, pretty similar to Word. And you've got all these other options as well for different types of justification, but those are the main ones. And you can also do things like bullet points. So it's a lot like Word. And so to finish this, pressing Enter, it's just going to keep moving down and doing a new line. So it's not like single line text. Enter won't finish it. To finish it, you just need to click outside that text box. But again, even that can be a bit tricky if you haven't set up the text style first. So setting the text style just gives you that initial height, and just trust me on this, it makes even multi-line text work much better, even though you can adjust the height with multi-line text. Okay, so maybe here, just going a little bit further with the formatting, this label here, and probably the others as well, is a bit large. So if I have on A3, that text there is 2.5, so maybe labels like this don't need to be as dominant. And to give you an idea of the minimum, 1.8 is often considered the absolute minimum height for text, because people with glasses for short distance vision anyway, can't read below that height. But 2 mil is probably better. Oops. Something like that. Usually smaller though than the contents. And so apart from that, you can have then lines in between. So I'll leave the design up to you. And so here, lines either side normally to frame it. And even the order, really, you can vary, but you typically would have things like the address The client name would be up with the address, and you can draw things like lines snapping to your text as you moving them. And so here I'm just going to my object snap settings, and I'm going to turn on insertion, because then I can draw lines snapping to the text. So you can see here that each text item has an insertion point. So if I draw a line from the insertion point of this text, I can now snap the one above to that line as well. And if I make the height the same, that one's 2, but they should line up exactly. So again, this text can also be copied, and so I should show you to change any of the text, the actual contents. For single line text, you can double click and just change by typing, but notice that I can't change the height or anything else, so you've got to remember how to use properties for single line text. But multi-line text, when you double click on that, you can of course type anything you want. So maybe we'll say I'm the client, and and so you can also change the other properties with multi-line text up the top, just like when you're typing. So again, the arrangement though is up to you, and then maybe though just to give you some general pointers, things like the drawing number will usually go down the bottom right. So you might have an area at the bottom for that, and I might just move this out of the way. So again, you can always just copy lines above, put divisions in. If you want to make them more accurate measurements, you can do that too, but for now, probably just by eye is good enough. So again here, dragging this down to line it up and making it the same height. And so again, I could have one of these copied down for the drawing number. And then if I double click to change it, I can change the justification to right. I say that's not right. Why is that? Oh yeah, that one's right. And of course type in the number. And maybe just move that down a bit.
So would this be the standard way that a interior designer would set out a
Yeah.
Titleblock?
Yep.
Or would it be, I thought sometimes each one is along the bottom?
No, I talked about that earlier. So for A3, you can do it either way. So you can either have it on the bottom and for A4 as well, or on the side. But then for A3 and above, so definitely once you get to A2, it just takes up too much room if you have it down the bottom, so you tend to have it down the side. And it's not an interior design thing, it's a general thing for drawing for everyone. So, and for technical drawings generally, I think maybe down the side looks better as well. So I'd say even interior designers generally would have them down the side for A3 and above. And maybe cover sheets though, you might have a different title block for the cover sheet where it's at the bottom. That's the only thing. So then, oh yeah, so the other thing then, again, this is just a general convention for the layout of title blocks, that you'd have things like the date and the scale at the bottom as well. So you might have a division for the line there. So I've just drawn a line there from the midpoint, and then I can move, say, the scale would normally go to the right, and then the date over here on the left. So again, if I draw a line now, so I'll just bring this one over and I'll draw a line from the insertion point of this text across to the right, and then it gives me something I can snap this to. And I actually just got to move over, so from there to there. That's better. So, so this line will obviously go in the end, but it just helps to have those extra lines for setting out. And so again, normally we have those divided like that, and again, just put more text in like this to put in your fields. So really what I'm trying to make clear here is that using text for everything, and often just changing the formatting, rather than trying to be too clever and tricky and using attributes, because honestly, a lot of the people who I've seen who've tried to set them up have just used them because they think they should, and often don't do a very good job of it, and actually make it more work than it is here just using text. And that's why I showed you those other title blocks, because they're not really set up that well, and it's actually going to take you longer using those than just using your own text. So I'll just here put one or two other things in. So the date, let's just say, is today. So the last thing I'll say about this before I go on is make sure you leave room for your own logo. So something maybe like that or something. And your own details, so maybe a field below that, but the rest is up to you. So one other little convention, though this isn't required, but should leave an area that'll be just blank at this stage. But you've got to have that set aside for amendments. So have you seen on most title blocks, even that one I showed you before, which I said wasn't the best, but it's still got this. Yeah. It's not a big area, but it's still got it. Here. Okay, so this area here would be for amendments. Not labelled. Usually it'll be labelled. So then as you make changes to the drawing, you list every new issue. So when the drawings get reissued, you'll have a letter for each amendment, and you'll have you put a brief description of each change every time you issue a new drawing. So you do need room set aside for that, but at this stage you wouldn't need to have anything there. But otherwise, those fields. So just try to have all of those fields in your title block. So, yeah, that's right. Date, really important. Oh, right. So yeah. Yeah, so you can change those as you go, and then definitely drawing number, scale, project number is optional actually, but it'll help you when you're storing all your own work. Definitely drawing name and drawn by. And project name and client name. So you don't even need to make it into a block. Go further than I have with mine, and then to put that onto a new page, what you need to do is right click on your layout tab, go to move or copy, and then just tick create a copy down the bottom, and usually choose move to end. Click OK. So that's going to give you an exact copy of that page. So you can see now I've got two identical layouts, and I can change things on this page, but the other page obviously hasn't changed. So that's a good process to follow. So essentially, once you've got one page set up, you can still change the viewports, but if you've done everything for the title block, that should just be copied across onto each new page you've made after that.